Let's see. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chaksurunmilitan-yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu-padaya Krishna-pristaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti-vedanta Swaminiti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhayevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasade Gaur Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So welcome all the devotees to our ongoing study of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhakti Vaibhava, and we're on Canto number 2, and we're going to begin today chapter 10. Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. Right? All your questions are answered in the Bhagavatam. So we studied chapter 8. We had Maharaj Parikshit give many questions to Sukadeva Goswami in chapter 8. And then in chapter 9, Sukadeva Goswami began to reply. The first question, which was replied to in the very beginning of the 9th chapter, was to explain how the living entity is a pure spirit soul, but he's residing in a material body. So Sukadeva Goswami replied to that, and it was covered in the first 3 verses of the chapter. And then the next question Sukadeva Goswami went on to deal with was how he was explaining the difference between the Paramatma and the Jivatma, between the Supreme Lord and the living entities. That was the 4th verse, and also went into up to verse 5 and 6 also. And then Sukadeva Goswami then went on to explain Atma Tattva, the science of the soul. The science of the soul.
Recording in progress.
So the science of the soul was explained, beginning from verse 4 practically up to verse 40 or 30, 38 like that. We heard that the Atma Tattva, the relationship between the Supreme Lord and the living entity and the material energy. And within that section, we have Sukadeva Goswami explaining about Lord Brahma, how Lord Brahma received the 4 seed verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And then we heard how this knowledge was given to Brahma, and Brahma passed on the knowledge to Narad, and then Narad gave that same knowledge to Vyasadeva, and it was Srila Vyasadeva who compiled for us the 18,000 verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And now we're beginning the 10th chapter, and Sukadeva Goswami is explaining the 10 different topics which are all there within the Srimad Bhagavatam. Of course, the Supreme Lord is the summum bonum, and he is the ashraya. He's the shelter for all the other topics. Everything is dependent on the Supreme Lord. Everyone else is dependent. We are all dependent on others and other things. But the Supreme Lord, He is fully independent. He doesn't need anything from anyone. That is the glory of the Supreme Lord. We are totally dependent. So Sukadeva Goswami, by explaining the 9 characteristics of the Bhagavatam, he explains how they're all the shelter of the 10th, the ashraya. They're all under the shelter of the ashraya. And they're all dependent on the ashraya. Only the ashraya, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is fully independent. But everything else depends on Him for its existence. So in this way, Sukadeva Goswami begins the 9th chapter. He lists, first of all, the 9 different items which make up the character. Well, the 10. He lists the 10 items. First, you see, Atra sargo vishargascha stanam poshanam utaya manvantaras anukata nirodo muktir ashraya. So we have first of all, we have sarga, the creation. And then there's the secondary creation, or the sub-creation, what is called visharga. Then that's followed by the planetary systems, sthanam. We get a description about that in different places in the Bhagavatam. We should point out that these 10 characteristics are not just limited to, like one place. For example, the first canto may describe sarga, but sarga can also be described in other places. The signs of God, anukata, ishanukata, the signs of God, it's the topics of Lord Krishna and about the devotees of Krishna. It's all through the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's not limited to just one canto. Of course, some cantos will describe these things more than others, like poshanam, protection. Now, Prabhupada gave titles for each of the cantos. We see the title of the 7th canto is poshanam, protection. But protection is described in many other places also. The first canto is called sarga, but sarga is also in other places. Mukti, liberation, and ashraya, the sammanbonam. The sammanbonam, meaning the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the ashraya. So there are 10 characteristics mentioned, and the ashraya is totally independent of everything else. But the other 9, they're all dependent. They're all dependent on the ashraya. Everything depends on the Supreme Lord. There's nothing independent of the Supreme Lord. That was mentioned in the Chaturshloki. All right, so we were going through the 10 items. Let's see, there was creation of the universe, the sub-creation, the planetary systems, protection by the Lord, poshanam, the creative impetus, utaya, then the change of Manus, the Manvantara, the science of God, Ishanukata, returning home back to Godhead, Nirodha, Mukti, liberation, and Ashraya, the Saman Bonam. So these are the 10 topics which are all discussed throughout Srimad Bhagavatam. So creation. General people are often confused what is actually creation. They think Lord Brahma is the creator. And they all give the credit to Lord Brahma, that he's the creator of the universe. They don't actually understand fully who actually did the creation. There's different phases of creation. There's the primary creation, because the elements have to be created. So who's doing that? Lord Brahma can't do it. He's not taken birth yet. He has to take birth. He takes birth within the universe. But the universes haven't been created. The Lord has to arrange for the creation of the universes. So there are two main phases of creation. There's the primary creation, which is the creation of the Supreme Lord himself, which is coming from Mahavishnu. And then there's the secondary creation, which is the creation within the universe, and that's the creation of Lord Brahma. So, ordinary people are confused. They think Brahma's the creator, isn't he? Yeah. But Brahma also has to be created. He has to also take birth. So that has to be arranged. We have to understand everything in its proper light. So only devotees actually have the proper understanding of these things, because they hear the Vedic literatures. For the common people, they don't hear, they just speculate. All right, so there are 10 items in Srimad Bhagavatam to be discussed in Srimad Bhagavatam. The creation means to create. There are 16 primary elements of creation. 16 primary elements, the 5 elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether. Then you have the 5 sense objects and the 5 senses, and then the mind. So 16 elements. These things have to be created. After we are given a residence, then we have to make a residence. You have to have these elements. And then from the combination of these elements with the modes of nature, then many other things are created, are produced. But the very initial phase of creation is to create the elements. And then, with the creation of the elements, then the universes come into existence, and within the universe, then Lord Brahma appears, taking birth from the lotus flower. All right, at the end of the purport of text number 3, Prabhupada explains here, he said, thus the original creation is directly from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or Para Brahman. And the secondary creation, as a reactionary result of the original ingredients, is made by Brahma. Thus the activities of the whole universe are started. So creation, in the material world, there has to be creation, and then maintained for some time, and then there will be annihilation. Everything will be destroyed in course of time. Of course, we have a long time. It's not that we're in a rush. There's a lot of time available. We just want to use it properly. So after explaining about the creation, then the next topic are the Manus, the Manvantaras. They are the administrators. Just like we have the Manu Samhita. The Manu, the text of Manu, telling people how to live, what is the proper behavior, what they should do and what they shouldn't do. These kind of things. This will be there in the teachings of Manu. So Manu is very important in the universe because he organizes and also engages different living entities in his service. So we can hear about this thing, the creation of the Manus, and then Ishakta, Ishanukata, the science of God. That's text number 5. The science of God describes the incarnations of the first personality of Godhead and his different activities with the activities of his great devotees. So the activities of the devotees is also there with the activities of the Lord. It's also purifying to hear about great devotees, just as it is purifying to hear about the Lord. We want to also hear about the devotees. So Prabhupada would often speak about the previous acharyas. He would glorify Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Jagannath Das Babaji, as well as his own spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada. So then text number 6 describes about Nirodha, meaning the winding up of the cosmic manifestation, and then goes into liberation. In text number 6 we get the definition of liberation, which is often quoted by Srila Prabhupada, Muktir Hidvanyata Rupam Swarupena Vayavastiti. What is the meaning of liberation? Liberation is the permanent situation of the form of the living entity after he gives up the change, after he gives up the changeable, gross and subtle material bodies. So liberation means to get free of the gross and subtle material body, come to the transcendental platform. So we all can develop our transcendental body by the activities of devotional service. Will qualify us for liberation. Okay, text number 5, purport describes about the material cosmic creation, how it serves two functions. The purpose of creation, there's two reasons why the Lord created. People often wonder, why did the Lord create material world? But there are two purposes described. First of all is that it allows living entities to satisfy their senses. They want sense gratification. So the Lord arranges for the material world that they can take birth in a material body and they can try to satisfy their senses. That is one purpose of the creation. But there's another purpose, which is a higher purpose, and that is that it gives the conditioned souls a chance to come back to Godhead, to get out of the material world, to go back to Godhead. So that is a higher purpose of creation. Of course, both purposes have to be served. Not everyone is ready to go back to Godhead. We have to understand the condition the situation of the conditioned souls. They're suffering. Yes, we know they're suffering, but what can you do? They don't want Krishna consciousness. They're not ready for it. So the Lord has arranged the material world in that way. Let them try to enjoy material senses in the material world, and when they become frustrated, then they will think about Krishna consciousness. So this is the point. These are two reasons why the Lord created the material world. Some people, they're not ready to go back to Godhead, so they have to experience the difficulty of sense gratification, trying to succeed in the material world, but finding it very difficult, a lot of trouble. So then there's a Jiva Goswami, he raises a question about this. He says that the conditioned souls, if they could hear about Krishna, they could develop their Krishna consciousness. And there's no need for the material world. Just let them hear about Krishna. But the problem is that after the conditioned souls, after they get the chance to hear about Krishna, they don't take it very seriously because their minds are so absorbed in thoughts of sense gratification. They just want to stay here in the material world. The example was given, just like when Brihaspati cursed Indra to become a pig. And then after some time, Brihaspati came to tell Indra, okay, now you come back. You give up the pig body and come back and rule. But Indra said, oh no, I like it here. I'm happy here. In the pig body, in the pig barn, with my pig family, I'm happy here. He didn't want to go and give up his body and go back to Godhead or go to the heavenly planets. So that's the situation. Materialistic people are so attached to the material world, they don't want to come to Krishna consciousness. And they're not attracted to serve Krishna. They just want sense gratification. So the Lord arranges for these two kinds of people. If someone interested to go back to Godhead, then the material world is a chance for them to purify themselves so that they can come to that stage of Krishna consciousness. But for others who are still thinking about sense gratification and are very attached to it, then the material world is there for them. Let them go ahead, try and enjoy and see. Judged by the results. So this is the situation. So people who want to be liberated, then they'll be trained to hear the Vedic scriptures like Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. They'll be trained for the higher purpose in life. Other people who are still planning for their sense gratification, no, they have to go and work. They have to go and, find a job, earn money, go and work in the factory, whatever they have to do to maintain their life. That's what they have to do. Because they don't want to chant, they don't want to hear about Krishna. So let them stay in the material world and work. And gradually, of course, the idea is that by working in the material world, eventually the worker will become so frustrated and despondent that he doesn't want to work anymore in the factory. And he's thinking about what is the alternative. So at that time he may take up Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada writes in the purport here, everyone is after some pleasure of humor for enjoyment, but does not know the supreme source of all attraction. The Vedic hymns inform everyone about the supreme source of all pleasures. The unlimited fountainhead of all pleasure is the personality of Godhead. One who is fortunate enough to get this information through transcendental literature like Srimad Bhagavatam becomes permanently liberated to occupy his proper place in the kingdom of God. So this is the idea, hearing about Krishna, hearing this anukata, ishanukata, then they can become qualified to go back to Godhead. And then text 7 describes about the Supreme Lord, the summum bonum, the source of the cosmic manifestation, as well as its reservoir and winding up. Thus he is the supreme fountainhead, the absolute truth. So we hear about the Lord and his Shristi Tattva, his work of creation. Of course, not only is he creating, but he's also maintaining, and then he empowers Lord Shiva to do the annihilation. Ultimately, the whole process is done by the Supreme Lord himself. Brahma is empowered by the mercy of the Supreme Lord to do creation. Vishnu himself maintains, and then Lord Shiva, who is empowered again, and he will annihilate in the evening. He will destroy everything so that the creation can begin again the next day. Okay, so we have the information from this text here that the Supreme Lord is the source of the cosmic manifestation, and he is the reservoir for winding up. So everything takes place by his arrangement, but he arranges to give the credit to others, just as he arranged Arjuna to get the credit on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So in the same way, the Supreme Lord arranges to give the credit for creation and annihilation to others. Ultimately, he's the one behind everything. At the end of the purport, text number 7, Srila Prabhupada has noted, thus it is concluded, by studying the complete Srimad Bhagavatam, that Lord Sri Krishna is the ultimate summum bonum, or the ultimate source of all energy. And according to the grades of worshippers, the indications of the nomenclature may be differently explained as Narayan, Brahma, Paramatma, etc. They're all different names, but they're all the same Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord comes as Brahma. The Supreme Lord comes as Paramatma. The Supreme Lord is not different from Narayan, but he comes in different ways, in different times. He appears to have a different form, but ultimately it's the same Supreme Lord. He's just appearing in different forms for the pleasure of his devotees. Some people are more attracted to the four-arm form. Not everyone likes to see the universal form with so many arms. We know Arjuna was fearful when he saw the universal form. So here we have text number 8. The individual person possessing different instruments of senses is called the Adhyatmic person, and the individual controlling deity of the senses is called Adhidaivic. The embodiment seen on the eyeballs is called the Adhibautic person. So this is a technical section of the chapter, a little difficult in the beginning to understand. We have to hear it again and again. But the Lord has described here about 3 different kinds of subjective personalities. Subjective means, it's in a subtle way, not actually manifest, but something like what we might see in our dream or something. So there are 3. We have the Adhyatmic person. Adhyatmic is like the internal person. You see somebody internally. You see he's always internalized. He's not so much with the mass of people all the time instructing them, but he's behind them and he's aware of what is the situation. So the Adhyatmic person is the internal person. The Adhibautic is the person you see with your eyeballs, the external person. And the Adhidaivic person is that person who's under the direction of these subtle, these demigods. We have to understand that we're not independent. So who's doing everything? So we could say, well, everything is done by the senses. But who's controlling the senses? There's gross senses, and then there's subtle senses. The subtle senses are the Adhidaivic person. And it's the subtle senses which go with the soul at the time of death. When the person dies, this Adhidaivic person will accompany the person to his next life. And that's why we see people, different people have different natures. Somebody's very good with their hands, they're very creative. Somebody is artistic, somebody is very musical. Different skills people have. Somebody's an artist. People have so many different skills, and it's not by chance, but it's more likely it happened by nature. So the Adhidaivic person, that's the subtle senses, and the gross senses sit on the subtle senses. It's the subtle senses which are there first, and the gross senses, they sit on the subtle senses. So there's the Adhyatmic person who's within, who's within, and we just see, he's the soul within, and he's just simply observing, seeing the senses and everything. And then there's the Adhidaivic person who is controlled by the senses, which are all under the control of the demigods. These different demigods of the senses, they will control the dealings of the Adhidaivic person. And the Adhibautic person is what you see outside with the gross senses. We can see on our eyeball the Adhibautic person. So these 3 persons are all described here in this verse. right? We have to understand this. These three persons, the Adi Atmic, Adi Daivik, and Adi Bhautik, are all interdependent. They depend on each other. They have no freedom unless you have some particular excuse. What is the independence of the living entity? Our independence to choose between Krishna and Maya. That is as far as our independence goes. If we choose Krishna, then we're fully under the protection and under the control of Krishna. And when we choose Maya, then we're fully under the control of Maya. We have that much choice, either Krishna or Maya. You choose Krishna, you're controlled by Krishna, by Yoga Maya. And you choose Maya, you're under the control of the external energy, the three modes of material nature. So that's our independence. So these three persons are interdependent. It's pointed out you can't have one without the other two. They depend on each other for their existence. But we have to understand that they're all subjective. In other words, we don't actually see them directly, but we see the effect of them. We can also take the position of these personalities. Just now, we have the low position, we're the conditioned souls. But we could go on to become like them, to take the higher position. We have to be awake, we have to be alert to go and to accept that opportunity. So it's a technical description there, given by Srila Prabhupada. He's explaining about these three persons and how they're interdependent, and they arrange for our different actions, our different behavior, our different appearance. Because the Adidaivic person brings the subtle senses, and it's the subtle senses which are actually working more than the gross senses. It's the subtle senses which are over everything and arranging for us. These three persons are the Adi Atmic, Adi Bhautik, and Adi Daivik person. They're actually the controllers, and we're the controlled. We're under their direction, under their control. We're thinking we're free, but actually we're not so free. We're under the control of these subtle forces, which are described here as being persons. So text number 9 continues. All three of the above-mentioned stages of life, stages of different living entities, are interdependent. In the absence of one, another is not understood. But the Supreme Being, who sees every one of them as the shelter of the shelter, is independent of all, and therefore he is the supreme shelter. So the purpose of this is actually to point out that there's the one Supreme Lord over everything, and he is actually independent and no one else. We're all under his control. it's described in the purport, without our having eyes, the sunlight is useless. And without sunlight, the eyes are useless. So they are interdependent. There's no point in having sunlight unless we have eyes. And there's no point in having eyes unless there is sunlight. You can't have one without the other. So they are interdependent. None of them is independent. So then Prabhupada continues with this argument, and he says, the natural question arises concerning who made them independent, who made them interdependent, who made them interdependent. If they're interdependent, there must be someone over them who made them interdependent. So this is a very important point in the argument in presenting the existence of the Supreme Lord, that there's someone over everyone. And Prabhupada then continues, the ultimate source of all interdependence is the Supreme Personality, the Supreme Truth, or Paramatma, the Super Soul, who is not dependent on anything else. He is the Swa Ashraya Shraya. He is the only dependent. He is only dependent on himself. And he is the supreme shelter of everything. He is the one who is only dependent on himself. We like to imitate God and we think we're independent on ourselves, but we should understand that is not actually possible. We're trying to imitate him, but we fail miserably. We are not able to be independent. We need his shelter. So, how to get out of this conditioning, how to get out of this illusion, that is the purpose of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam and taking up devotional service. Prabhupada explains, to get out of this illusory conception of factual life, the individual soul has to depend on the super soul to be recognized as one with him. In that sense also, the super soul is the supreme shelter, and there is no doubt about it. So we have to take shelter. Just like we're always telling people in Krishna consciousness, we encourage people, oh yes, take shelter, go ahead, take shelter. So here also in Srimad Bhagavatam, the same point is being made here in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam. Take shelter. And it's described here, take shelter of the super soul. The spiritual master, of course, is the external manifestation of the super soul. There's no difference. You take shelter of the super soul. He's the expansion of Krishna in the heart of all living entities. Or you take shelter, the externally manifest representative of Krishna in the form of the spiritual teacher who is the liberated soul, who is fully engaged in Krishna's service. So there's no difference. You take shelter in this way. But we have to learn, we do need to take shelter. We need that shelter. And Krishna is there. He's there as a super soul for all of us to take shelter. And he comes also, he's manifested in the Srimad Bhagavatam, that we can take shelter of the Srimad Bhagavatam and hear from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Of course, not everyone's able to do this. People have poor fund of knowledge. The ignorant, the less fortunate persons, they're not able to surrender to Krishna. They have that problem. So text 10 goes on to describe more about the nature of this cosmic manifestation, how Lord Mahavishnu begins the creation. We have the appearance of the first Purusha avatar, and then he enters into each of the separate universes, desiring to lay on the created transcendental water, Garbhudak ocean. So you have Mahavishnu laying on the Karana ocean, and from his body the universes are coming out, and then he expands himself into each of the universes. So this is the beginning of the creation. With every breath of Mahavishnu, the universes are exhaled out, and as he inhales, all the universes come back in again. And that exhalation of Mahavishnu, how long will that be? What period of time will that be? One breath of Mahavishnu?
1000 Chaturyug, Sahasrayug Paryantam.
Sahasra Yuga Paryantam. Well, that's one day of Brahma, right?
That is the life of Brahma Maharaj.
Right. The life of Brahma, right. It will be the life of Brahma, right. Not just one day of Brahma, but the life of Brahma. One breath is the life of Brahma. And Brahma, of course, he has to take birth in the universe, and then the creation begins there. So we can understand just how vast the creation is, and how the period of the time scale of the creation is so inconceivable. It's so beyond our comprehension to understand such durations of time. It's just so difficult for us tiny conditioned souls. So the point is to understand the greatness of the Supreme Lord and how his potencies are inconceivable. This point is made again and again in the early cantos of the Srimad Bhagavatam. We want to understand the inconceivable nature of the Supreme Lord. And that's why it's important for us to hear also about Srishti Tattva, the creation of the world. We want to hear how everything comes about by his creation. So, in this purport, actually, the point is raised. This is the purport, text number 10. So, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur answers, but the question is, and Prabhupada writes, some may argue, why not relish the transcendental Leela of the Lord, as exhibited in the land of Mathura and Vrindavan, which are sweeter than anything in the world? Because we're hearing about creation, we're hearing about the activities of the Lord, and hearing about creation, that is also the Lord's Leela. It's Leela because it's transcendental. We should understand when the Lord does the work of creation, there's nothing material about it. It's a transcendental pastime of the Lord. And because it's transcendental, we consider it to be pastime, Leela. So people will say, well, if we're hearing Leela, let's hear Vrindavan Leela. Why are we hearing this kind of Leela, creation Leela? Not very interesting, we think, not very important. But Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur answers here in the purport, right? What's his reason? Why does he say we don't want to hear, we don't want to just simply hear about the Lord and Mathura and Vrindavan? What's the problem? Who can answer?
Because the neophytes will not understand properly about Krishna, about his transcendental activities and his Leela.
Yes, we're neophyte. We don't understand the transcendental nature of the Lord's pastimes. We're identifying with the body. the Lord's pastimes, they are actually relishable for new devotees. Neophyte devotees will misunderstand the transcendental activities. If we hear about Krishna Lila, gopis and so on, the neophyte devotees will misunderstand, and we will want to imitate, and we will not properly understand the transcendental nature of these loving exchanges. But if we hear about creation, that will be good for us. That will help us to understand more of the Lord's inconceivable potencies. And Prabhupada gives some examples about this. He said, just like in the yoga system, sometimes people do bodily exercises. Bodily exercises, yoga exercises, help a person who is very much attached to the body. And it will help to reduce their attachment for the pleasure of the senses. By doing different yoga asanas, it will take away their attention from the physical body. And it will prepare them for a higher level of meditation. So the same is true in hearing about creation and destruction. It is for people who are too much materially attached. We need to hear how this world is created and destroyed. And this will help to purify us and detach us from all thoughts of sense gratification. So then Prabhupada goes on, he discusses about the scientists, how they're so blind. He said they don't see the supreme scientist behind the creation. They don't see the laws which are there in the material nature. They're discovering different laws in the material nature, and they give them names, Newton's laws of motion, Einstein's quantum theory, so many, they'll name them after different scientists and philosophers. But who is the actual lawmaker? Who made these laws? We don't give the credit to Krishna and Govinda and Gopinath. We could use Krishna's names. Why are we naming these things after mundane people who are conditioned souls? Actually, all of these laws are the laws of the Supreme Lord. We should say Govinda's laws of motion, right? We should name them after Krishna. That would be much nicer, to understand everything is coming from him. So that's the difference, though. As Prabhupada said, there's a difference. The devotees always praise the Lord, and the scientists, mundaners, materialists, they praise the physical laws. They don't see who's actually made the laws. We want to understand everything in the proper way. So understanding the power, the inconceivable nature of the Lord will help us to have more appreciation in course of time to come to understand his transcendental pastimes. So Prabhupada writes at the end of the purport of text 10, and for this reason only, either in the Bhagavad Gita or in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the pastimes of the Lord in the material world are delineated for the benefit of those men with a poor fund of knowledge. Okay, then Sukadeva Goswami goes on to describe more about the nature of the Supreme Lord. that he's not impersonal, that he's a person. We should know all the material ingredients. We should understand the nature of this creation. And in this way we'll come to understand how much we're fully dependent on the Lord, that he's providing everything for the maintenance of this creation, for the maintenance of every living entity. Prabhupada said the little insects like the ants, they need to get a grain of sugar. And somehow they're getting grains of sugar every day. And the elephant, he has to eat so many kilos of food every day. And who's feeding the elephants? They're also getting their food by the grace of the Lord. The Lord is providing. Eko bahunam yo vedati kamam. That one Supreme Lord is providing the needs of all living entities. We're dependent on him. Is he dependent on us? He is Atmarama. He is fully satisfied in himself. But, of course, he also can enjoy loving relationships with his devotees. As we heard yesterday about Prema Bhakti, how he transmits messages to his pure devotees. He gives them messages. Can you think of any examples where the Lord gave messages to his pure devotees? Messages into the heart? Remember yesterday we were hearing about that? The Prayojana? Where the Lord actually transmits messages into the heart of the pure devotees. Can you remember any pastimes like that? Where the devotee gets a message from the Lord into his heart? Anyone?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes. Hare Krishna Maharaj.
I just got in my mind about Harishori Prabhu when he got a message from the Lord Krishna, when he saw Krishna face to face. And he asked Harishori Prabhu to write a commentary on the verses of Bhagavatam.
On the verses of Bhagavatam, Harisori?
Yes, Maharaj.
Did he write a commentary on the verses of the Bhagavatam?
On the 10th canto, Maharaj, about all these pastimes of the Lord, Damodar Leela and all this.
Okay. I didn't know about that. That Harisori, Prabhupada's disciple?
Not Prabhupada disciple, Maharaj. This Harishori Prabhu from the other Sampradaya who wrote a commentary on the Bhagavatam.
Oh, okay. All right.
About when Brahma heard the song from the Lord Tapa Maharaj.
Okay. So he heard sound of tapa. And so how did he respond?
He doing tapasya.
Yes, he took that sound to be divine. And he began to undergo tapasya. For how long?
1,000 of Brahma.
Yeah, 1,000 years of the Devas. A long time. He had to be very determined. Yes, we see the Lord inspiring devotees, just like Madhavendra Puri. Madhavendra Puri was in Govardhan. And remember the pastime? What happened?
When Gopal asked to give chandan to his body.
Well, first of all, he asked him, get me out of here. He was buried.
Oh, yes.
Buried in the hill, right?
Yes.
So they had to dig him out. So he had to get some people to help, and they dug the ground and they brought him out. And then the Lord told him, yes, bring me chandan and camphor. And so Madhavendra Puri went off to Jagannath Puri. And then the Lord told him, it's all right that I and Gopinath are the same. You can give the chandan and camphor, you can give it here to Shirakura Gopinath. And so the chandan was all given to Gopinath. So this was the Lord acting on the heart of his devotee. Transcendental messages. And similarly, Srila Prabhupada. How did the Lord act on Prabhupada's heart? The Lord told him, first of all told him he had to leave home, get out of the house, go home, go to Vrindavan. And then the Lord told him, go to America, go to the West, print books. So Prabhupada was getting the instruction. Transcendental messages into the heart. So those pure-hearted devotees, they're constantly in touch with Krishna. They constantly see the pastimes of Krishna going on. Prabhupada would say, I'm not in New York, I'm always in Vrindavan. And his eternal Leela and his spiritual body is always in Vrindavan. The devotees of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they were always in somewhere there, although they were taking part in some kirtan, they were actually thinking of Krishna and taking part in some other Leela with Krishna. And they'd be talking about the price of milk and going to the market and so on. And then you have also Krishna Das Kaviraj. Krishna Das Kaviraj, there was a problem in his house, and then Lord Nityananda appeared to him. And Lord Nityananda told him, you have to leave. Go out, get out from here. Go to Vrindavan. So Krishna Das Kaviraj left even before the morning came. He didn't wait for the morning. He left in the night. He just got out of the house and went to Vrindavan and stayed with Rupa and Sanatan and Raghunath. So there are many examples. The Lord acting on the heart of the devotees, communicating with them. So we're hearing about Mahavishnu, how he begins the work of creation, and he wants to create the different varieties of living entities. Text number 13, text 13, Prabhupada explains about the nature of the dependence of the living entity on the Lord. The Lord himself is fully independent, but we are fully dependent. So Prabhupada writes, as such, before the creation or manifestation of the material cosmic world, the Lord exists as total energy, Mahasamasti, and thus desiring himself to be diffused to many, he expands himself further into multi-total energy, Samasti. From the multi-total energy, he further expands himself into individuals in 3 dimensions, namely Adi-Atmic, Adi-Daivic, and Adi-Bhautic, as explained before, Vyasti. As such, the whole creation and the creative energies are non-different and different simultaneously, because everything is an emanation from him. The Mahavishnu or Mahasamasti, nothing of the cosmic energy is different from him. But all such expanded energies have specific functions and display as designated by the Lord. Therefore, they are simultaneously different from the Lord. The living entities are also similar energy, marginal potency of the Lord, and thus they are simultaneously one with and different from Him. So you can see Prabhupada's explaining very clearly Lord Chaitanya's philosophy, that everything is one with God and at the same time different from Him. There is the original creator, Mahavishnu, and then from him comes all the different universes, and then within each universe he expands himself and he appears in the bottom of each universe as Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, and then he will expand himself further as Shirodakashayi Vishnu into the heart of all the living entities. And the living entities are also there. They're also the different potencies of the Lord. They're the marginal energy of the Lord. So you have the internal potency of the Lord, and we have the marginal potency of the Lord, and you have all the different elements of the material nature, the external energy. So within the creation, all the different energies of the Lord are present. So it's one with the Lord, but at the same time different from Him. The material nature, of course, is never equal to the marginal potency. They're both Prakriti, but one is superior Prakriti and the other is the inferior Prakriti. The living entities, they're the superior Prakriti because they have consciousness. The other Prakriti, dull matter, has no consciousness. But at the same time, we're not equal to the Lord Himself or the Lord's expansions, like Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, Shirodakashayi Vishnu. They're all directly the internal feature of the Lord, the internal potency. So Prabhupada then continues, the liberated living entities, however, in the Sanatan manifestation are unconditionally surrendered souls, and therefore they are not subject to the conditions of creation and annihilation. So Prabhupada's encouraging everyone, become a liberated soul, get out of the material world, don't take birth again, get out of this world. So hearing about the potency of the Lord, how He is controlling, we have the controlling entities, the controlled entities, and the material bodies. Right? The controlling entity, we have the Supreme Lord, we have the controlled entities, the living entity, and we have the material bodies. So we have sense energy, mental force, bodily strength. It's all different energies of the Supreme Lord. Everything comes from the Lord. There's nothing independent of Him. And in the purport of verse number 16, Prabhupada gives a very clear explanation of how everything is totally dependent on the Lord. He says, no one has independent existence. The purport of text 16, just as no electric lamp has independent effulgence, each and every electrical instrument depends fully on the total powerhouse. The total powerhouse depends on the reservoir of water for generating electricity. Water depends on the clouds. The clouds depend on the sun. The sun depends on creation. And the creation depends on the movement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause of all causes. So Prabhupada has traced everything from the movements of every electrical instrument, he's traced it all back to the Supreme Lord, to show us that there's nothing independent of the Supreme Lord. So then the chapter goes on to we hear about the creation of the Virata-rup. The Lord's Virata-rup again is being described, and the different organs and limbs of the different Virata-rup are being created. And these are being described because these are all different coverings over the soul. The living entity, all of us are pure souls. The soul is never contaminated, but it is covered. And we're hearing Sukadeva Goswami is describing the different coverings, the different organs and layers which are covering over the original soul, the spiritual nature of the living entity. So this goes on for several verses. We'll hear about the creation of all the different organs. We'll hear, first of all, text 17 is describing become agitated by hunger and thirst. So when we're agitated by hunger and thirst, then we want to eat and drink, and for that we need the mouth. The mouth has to open. And then text 18 goes on to describe, from the mouth, the palate has to be there. In order to chew and taste things, you have to have a palate. The tongue was also generated. Different tastes came into existence so that the tongue can relish them. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes rasoham apsu kontiya, the taste in water. There has to be some taste there. So this is all covering the original nature of the soul. Prabhupada explains in the purport of text 18, the tongue and the palate being instrumental are adibhutam, or forms of matter. But the functioning deity, who is a living entity, is adidaivik. Whereas the person undergoing the function is adi-atmic. Thus, the three categories are also Thus, the three categories are also explained as to their birth after the opening of the mouth of the Virata Purush. So the Virata Purush, the different organs in the Virata Purush, they're all different coverings over the living entity. Text 19 goes on to describe more about speaking. We heard about tasting, so the tongue is also used for speaking. So the controlling deity is there, and speaking is generated from the mouth by fire. But when he was laying in the water, all these functions remained suspended. Therefore, when the Supreme Purush desired to smell odors, the nostrils and respiration were generated. And in order to smell things, odors came into existence, and the deity of air, because air carries smell. Without the air, we cannot convey the aroma. It's the air which transports that aroma. So that air also became manifested. Then text 21, everything existed in darkness. The Lord desired to see himself and all that was created. So then the eyes and the illuminating God, the sun. And with the sun came the power of vision and the object of sight. All became manifest. Right? With the sun, we can see. Without the sun, you cannot see anything. So the sun has to be there. And the sun is the eye of the universal form of the Lord. And with the sun, then we also got eyes, and we can also see. Then 22 describes about hearing, the power of hearing, and the deity of hearing, and the objects of hearing, they all became manifest. Of course, hearing is very important for us as devotees. And we should understand they're also given by the grace of the Lord. The Lord provides everything for us so that we can advance in spiritual knowledge. We can hear about Krishna. We can chant his glories. Then text 23 describes there was a desire to perceive the characteristics of matter, like softness, hardness, warmth, cold, lightness, heaviness, all of these different sensations. So in order to perceive these different things, there is skin. There's a covering of air through which sense perception becomes prominent. The skin is a covering. So with the skin we can perceive these different sensations. We can perceive what is hard and soft, what is warm and what is cold. Right? The skin pores, and the hairs on the body, they're all interdependent with the touch sensation. Our sense of touch comes through the skin pores, the hairs on the body. But Prabhupada explains there's an intimate relation between the hairs on the body and the vegetation on the body of the earth. The vegetables are nourishment for the skin, both as food and medicines, as stated in the 3rd canto. So just as we have a body, and there's the hair on the body can perceive these different things, so similarly the earth planet has also hair on its body in the form of different vegetation which grows. And these vegetables get their nourishment from the earth. And it provides important food and medicine for us. We don't need to take all the chemicals which people take. You get everything provided by nature. The Lord has provided for everyone. Text 24 goes on speaking about more senses. 2 hands, the controlling deity, Indra, become manifest. Then acts dependent on both the hands and the demigods. So we have the hands, and the hands are controlled by the demigods. And the demigods are not independent. The demigods, they're also under the control. They're under the control of the Supreme Lord. So we act under the control of the demigods, and the demigods, they act under the control of the Supreme Lord. Prabhupada explains, as long as a living entity continues to be puffed up by his tiny existence, he is to be understood to be under the stringent control of the external energy of the Lord, and there is no question of liberation from the clutches of material illusion. So, we have to understand the nature of the Lord's potency, how he bewilders us, that we become proud of our tiny existence in this material world, how insignificant we are. So in this section, Sukadeva Goswami is explaining how covered up we are, how we're so covered the different coverings which are over this soul. This is all because of our illusion. So we heard about the arms. Now we hear, next one, text 25, we hear about the legs, and the controlling deity is named Vishnu. And by his supervision, all varieties of human beings are busily engaged in occupational sacrifice. So definitely, of course, the legs are very important. Prabhupada explains, because they do not know this secret, all their activities are targeted towards the goal of sense gratification without control. And therefore, by all this business, they are unknowingly entering into the deep region of darkness. At the end of the purport, Prabhupada says, for performing such occupational duties of life, the leg is the most important instrument of the body, because without the help of the legs, one cannot move from one place to another. And therefore, the Lord has special control over the legs of the human beings, which are meant for performing yajnas. Right? We use our legs to chant and dance. When we go on Sankirtan, chanting and dancing, we like to use the legs to dance. Prabhupada himself showed us to dance. He liked to see the devotees using their legs. We'd get everyone stand up, dance. 26 talks about sex pleasure, the controlling deity. And then 27 is describing evacuation and the controlling deity, Mitra. 28, we hear about the navel and the air of departure, and the shelter for both death and the separating force. 29, a desire to have food and drink, the abdomen and the intestines and also the arteries became manifested. The rivers and seas are the source of their sustenance and metabolism. So earlier we heard about the mouth, now we're hearing about the desire to actually digest that food, and that's going into the abdomen. So there should be intestines and there has to be arteries. It's not enough just to have a mouth. You have to have also intestines and you have to have arteries, and everything has to be digested properly. And Prabhupada explains, the body's health is dependent on healthy action of the intestines and the arteries. The rivers and the seas become the controlling deities of the two. Keep the intestines and the arteries in healthy order. And then text number 13, there was a desire to think about the activities of his own energy. Then the heart, the mind, the moon, determination, and all desires became manifest. In this way that we can see how everything is being arranged. Text 31, we're hearing about more coverings, the different elements, the 7 elements of the body, the different layers on the skin itself, the flesh, blood, fat, marrow, bone, all made of earth, water and fire. And the life breath produced by sky, water and air. So water is a common element. It should be noted herewith that due to necessity, water being most prominent in the material creation, is the principal element of all the 5. So water is, of course, a very big problem. We're always worried. We see the Yamuna River become drier and drier every year. In fact, many great rivers around the world become drier. We see the snow caps melting. People are worried about the heating up of the planet, right? How the planet's becoming warmer and warmer, and the snow caps are melting, and the great ice poles, the North Pole, South Pole, they're beginning to melt, and the ice there is beginning to break up. And as they break up, then the sea level will increase, and the land will be lost. So these are all different dangers, and these are all due to our abuse of material nature, that we don't take proper care of the water. So fresh water is very important. Prabhupada says, fresh produce from the earth, like grains and vegetables, as well as fresh water and heat, is good for the upkeep of the gross body. So you want to keep our body good? We need these things. We need grains, vegetables, fresh water, and heat. So we live in these very cold countries. You don't get much heat. You don't get a chance to enjoy the sun rays. Sunlight, very important. You get vitamin D from the sun rays. Vitamin C you can get from oranges, fruit like that. Vitamin D you get from the sun rays. So this thing very important for us to keep health. Take a sun bath every day. Get in the sun and let the body enjoy some sunlight. Our life is so artificial. Everything is covered. We've lost everything. So, text 32, we hear about the sense organs attached to the modes of nature, the mind, material experience. Mind subject to all kinds of experience, happiness, just intelligence also important, the feature of the mind's deliberation. We have to cultivate good intelligence to control the mind. The mind will always be bewildered by so many different experiences. So we have to keep steady intelligence. So in this way we see how different coverings are placed over the form of the Lord. Text 32 describes the external feature of the Lord is covered by gross forms, planets, which were explained to you by me. The external feature is covered by gross forms. So the gross forms are there. These different layers are all described. And Prabhupada explains in the purport, therefore one of the various energies of the personality of Godhead cannot, of course, cover the Lord, but the coverings are created by Him to cover the eyes of the conditioned souls who want to lord it over the material nature. So the Lord Himself is not covered, but we become covered. Right? The coverings are placed over us. We're not able to perceive our actual self. Prabhupada explains earlier in that purport, these coverings are just like the covering of clouds for the sun. So the cloud doesn't cover the whole sun, but it appears from where we are that the sun is covered by the cloud. But if we move, then we will see that the sun is not covered by the cloud. The cloud can cover a portion of the sun, but it cannot cover the whole sun. In the same way, the Supreme Lord, He's never covered, but we're covered The illusion is ours, not the Lord's. So materialistic people, they deny the existence of God. They cannot see Him. But the devotees can see Him with the eye of knowledge. So we've heard about the gross manifestation, and then text 34 goes on to describe about a finer form. So the gross manifestation was the Virata Rup. Virata Rup is seen by the pantheists. The pantheists, they'll see everything as God, and everything is material. Everything is material is God to the pantheist. But for the monist, they see the universal form. They don't see the universal form. They see only the impersonal feature of the Lord. They see the Lord as nothing material. The Virata Rup is all material. So the pantheists, they see everything as material and they think it's all God. But the monists, they don't see anything material. They only see the oneness, the Brahman, the energy, the spiritual energy. They don't see anything material. But they're both wrong. Neither are right. External potency. It's not going to be the internal potency of the Lord. Right?
Yes, Maharaj.
And how many arms does He have? How many arms does He have? How many arms does the Lord have in the spiritual world? In the spiritual world, how many arms does the Lord have there in Vaikuntha?
Four arms.
Yes, and how many arms does He have in Goloka?
Two arms.
Yes, but what about in the Virata Rup? How many arms does He have?
Unlimited.
Yeah, many arms, right? So the form, the Virata Rup, is nothing like the Lord's form in the spiritual world. It's very different thing. And as you said, it's material also, right? Yes. And what about the impersonal conception of the Supreme Lord? What's the problem with that? Why we don't accept that? Why the pure devotees are not accepting that form? Right? Because it doesn't support devotional service. It doesn't encourage our devotional service. It doesn't facilitate the mood of devotion. If we cultivate this oneness, the mood of the oneness of being one with the Supreme Lord, there's no hope for us to engage in the Lord's service. Very difficult anyway, to get rid of that conception of oneness. In action. Can you understand?
Yes, Maharaj.
So impersonalism and pantheism are both rejected by the pure devotees of the Lord. Okay, going ahead then, 36. We hear about the Lord, how he does manifest himself, transcendental form, transcendental name, quality, pastimes, entourage, oh wonderful, many different things to contemplate the Lord, all transcendental features of the Lord. And Prabhupada discusses all of these. And then he goes on to describe more about it. We hear about all the different living entities, different creatures all over the creation, and they're all part of the creation of the Supreme Lord. They're all his parts and parcels, and he's the Supreme Father, the Father of all of these different living entities. So Prabhupada explains, some of the living entities are relatively happy in better conditions of life. This is text number 37 to 40 in the purport. Some of the living entities are relatively happy in better conditions of life, whereas others are in distressed conditions of life. But factually, none of them are actually happy in material conditional life. No one can be happy in prison life, although one may be a first-class prisoner and another a third-class prisoner. The intelligent person should not try to be promoted from third-class prison life to first-class prison life, but should try to be released from the prison altogether. Right? That is the important message here. We want to understand, get out of the prison house. Don't just try to be comfortable there. So Sukadeva Goswami is instructing Maharaj Parikshit in this. He's explaining about how the demigods are human beings, how the different living entities, they're divided into different conditions of life. We have the mode of goodness, passion and ignorance, different conditions of life, and we acquire, according to our position, we acquire different natures. If you're in the mode of goodness, we become conditioned to knowledge and happiness, a feeling of superiority. But people in the mode of ignorance, they have a different kind of happiness, different concepts. So it's important to get the right association. We want to improve our situation, we want a better condition of life, we have to get the right association. And Prabhupada discusses about that association. You get bad association, it will degrade you. You get good association, it will elevate you. You give up the bad habits. Ajamil got that he got some association with the Vishnu Duras and he gave up his bad habits. So in different incarnations, the Lord establishes the creation, different conditions for all the different conditioned souls, human and non-human. He explains the material world, all different conditions for different people. We have to understand the nature of the material world. That we're thinking some places good, some places not so good. We're thinking some places heaven. Some people want to go to heaven. But there also the problems, the miseries of material life are there. So one wants to be very careful to avoid it. So at the end of the creation, then the Lord comes as Rudra, and he can destroy the creation. And that is also done through the arrangement of Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sometimes the Supreme Personality of Godhead will take the position of Lord Brahma, and he will do the work of creation. And in the same way, Lord Shiva is empowered to do the work of destruction by the arrangement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And sometimes the Personality of Godhead may also take the position of Lord Shiva. Of course, Lord Shiva is simply the expansion of the Personality of Godhead. And so in this way, the pure devotees, they desire to see more and more glorious things beyond these features. As we were saying, hearing about the creation, this is for the neophyte devotees. We need to hear about the creation. We should know about it, we should understand it. But those elevated transcendentalists, they will want to hear about more higher topics of the Lord, more transcendental dealings of the Lord. They will want to know more about the Lord's activities, for example, in the spiritual world. And that is why we see at the end of this chapter that you have the topic is brought up that they want to hear more about the activities, about Vidura, Maitreya, what happened when Vidura met Maitreya, and what did they discuss. Sukadeva Goswami, or rather Maharaj Parikshit, wants to hear about higher things. He wants to know about what happened there. After hearing for the second canto a lot of philosophy, a lot of creation, he wants to hear more transcendental topics. So that will be described in the beginning of the third canto, and you'll hear about Vidura meeting with Maitreya. At the end of the chapter, text 46 is brought up about 3 different types of creation. There are different types of creation in the material world. You have the Mahakalpa, the Vikalpa, and the Kalpa, right? The Mahakalpa being the creation of Mahavishnu, and the Vikalpa being the creation of Brahma, and the Kalpa being one day of Brahma. Right? Mahavishnu, he is a Mahakalpa, his creation is Mahakalpa, because the universe is coming out from his body. So this is the Mahakalpa. And then the Vikalpa, you have the creation of Brahma and the different material ingredients. So that's going on within the universe. The creation of Brahma and the different ingredients of the creation, the different elements which are required for the creation, that is all Vikalpa. But the creation of Brahma, which is just for each day of the life of Brahma, that is called Kalpa. So sometimes the Kalpas and the pastimes will be different in different Kalpas. Sometimes, just like Lord Varaha, the color of Lord Varaha in one Kalpa may be red, and another Kalpa may be white. Different Kalpas may be some differences there, not necessarily the same. We should understand Kalpas, that's a relatively small period of time, not according to our time scale, but according to universal time. It's only one day of Brahma. So these 3 creations are mentioned. Okay, so then that's the chapter finishes with Sukadeva Goswami said, I will now explain to you the subjects explained by the great sage. The great sage meaning Maitreya. What did Maitreya explain to Vidura? So we heard what Brahma what the Lord explained to Brahma and what Brahma explained to Narada. So the third canto, you'll hear what Maitreya explained to Vidura. And they also want to know, why did Vidura go home after leaving home? Why did he go back? So those questions will be answered. All right, so are there some questions today? Because this is the end of the second canto. I'm sure you have a lot of questions.
Maharaj, I have questions.
Yes, Prabhu.
Sorry, Mata, you carry on.
No,
Go ahead,
Prabhuji.
Prabhu. Go ahead.
Okay. Maharaj, we understand that when Karunadaksha Vishnu, he exhales, that exhale period, as you mentioned, it is 311.04 trillion years, which is the life of Brahma. Now, the question, Maharaj, is what about inhale? So can we understand that inhale also is equal to 311.04 trillion years, and that is a gap between two Brahmas? Can we understand that, Maharaj?
Yes. Yes, you can understand like that. Just as we understand the day of Brahma is equal to the night of Brahma, so you can understand the inhalation of Brahma and the exhalation of Brahma to be of a similar time duration.
Yeah, Maharaj, my second question is, now life of our Brahma of our universe is 311 trillion years. Now, when Lord inhales, along with our Brahma, the Brahmas of other universes also go inside along with the universes. So how to understand, because they each one have a different lifespan, how to understand that they will go one behind other with a different lifespan, how that happens, Maharaj?
Oh, you mean the different Brahmas in other universes?
Yes, Maharaj, because they may have different lifespans.
Well, we don't know about that. We're not told. Do you know? I've never seen any detailed information about that. The understanding is that the Lord breathes out, all the universes come out together. I don't know that they all come at different times.
Because my understanding was that each universe maybe, because Brahma is different. Some Brahma, maybe he's a million-headed Brahma. So accordingly,
yes,
depending on the universe
yes,
size,
different numbers of heads, different sizes of universes, but they're all coming out. They're all coming out from the skin pores of Mahavishnu, and they're all coming in. Same, right? The Lord breathes out, and they breathe in. Doesn't mean that they all have to come at different times. It can all happen.
Okay,
can all happen together.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Dandos Maharaj.
Yes.
Maharaj, after going through all these 5 chapters, one question comes in my mind. What is the difference between a liberated soul in this material world and associate of the Lord in the spiritual world?
Well, the liberated soul in this world, you may say, he's going to have to give up his body at some point, right? He'll give up the body to go back to the spiritual world. So his body, or of course, he may be a fully liberated soul. In other words, body may be spiritual. His body, just like we see, how did Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda leave the world? They entered into the deity. Narottam Das Thakur, how did he leave the body? He became milk when he was taking bath in the Ganga. These are, fully liberated souls with very pure bodies. So how did they leave the world? Some entered into the deity, and Narottam Das, he became milk when he's taking bath in the Ganga. So it's going to be different ways they will leave the body, give up the body, but the point is they're here in the material world. They don't remain here eternally. This is not their eternal abode. They have to give up this place. So that's really the difference. Otherwise, the activities will be the same. You could say here in this world they'll be doing preaching work and delivering the conditioned souls. So they come to this world to deliver the conditioned souls. In the spiritual world, they're taking part in the pastimes of the Lord. Right? Why do they come to this world? They come to preach. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to establish the Yuga Dharma. That was one reason, but he also had his own reasons to come. He wanted to taste Radha Bhav. He wanted to taste that loving ecstasy which the gopis had for Krishna. And so he had that desire, his own particular desire for coming here in this world. And there are certain pastimes, certain leelas which take place in this world which cannot take place there. Just like in the spiritual world, there's no birth. Krishna doesn't take birth there, but Krishna can take birth here. When he comes here, he will take birth. So that leela is not there in the spiritual world. But generally, the liberated souls who are coming from the spiritual world, they will come to preach. Prabhupada, you know, we often say Prabhupada came from the spiritual world. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati is also described to be a ray of Vishnu. Now, why would a ray of Vishnu come? What did he do? He's preaching, constantly preaching the message of Mahaprabhu and encouraging the Sankirtan movement, making propaganda for the Sankirtan movement. So that is the business of the liberated souls. Liberated soul means ihahasya hare dashe karmana manasa gira. Right? One who uses body, mind and words in the service of Krishna, he's a liberated soul. Jivan mukta suchate. He's a liberated soul in this lifetime. Because he's using body, mind and words in the service of Krishna. Now, what service of Krishna? That will be different for different people. You know, some people write books. Others, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't write any books, he just preached. Some people, they'll get temples built. Different things, it will be different for different people. Narottam Das, we didn't see any big temple Narottam Das made, but he wrote beautiful songs about Krishna. Okay?
Yes, Dhandavat Maharaj.
Of course, in the spiritual world, they also have beautiful songs. The gopis are always singing songs about Krishna. Okay? Any other questions?
Yes, Maharaj.
Yes, yes, go ahead, Maharajas.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I have a few questions, Maharaj. Thank you so much for speaking with Bhagavatam. So my question is from text 18, Maharaj. From text 18, when it says about, like when we're talking about Adhyatmik, Aditaivik and Adibhautik. So here it says that the tongue and the palate, being an instrumental or Adibhautik, I understand it, Maharaj, are forms of matter. But the functioning deity who is living entity is Aditaivik. Whereas the person undergoing the function is Adhyatmik. So I didn't understand the difference between Adhyatmik and Aditaivik here, Maharaj. Because what I understood is from the other texts that all these like sense organs, they are the Adibhautik, and the controlling deities are the Aditaivik. And the function, the person undergoing that subtle elements are Adhyatmik. So I'm a little bit confused with this text, Maharaj.
The purport of text 18, right? Yeah.
Text 18, yes, Maharaj.
The Prabhupada's talking about the tongue and the palate being instrumental, adibhotam, right?
Yeah.
Is that part? Yeah?
That is, Maharaj, yeah.
So, then...
So I didn't exactly understand the difference here mentioned by Aditaivik and Adibhautik.
The tongue and the palate are adibhotic, the forms of matter. But the functioning deity, who is a living entity, is aditaivik. Whereas the person undergoing the function is adhyatmic. Thus the three categories are also independent. So you were comparing, what's the other section you were talking about?
Yeah, because in other sections for the next text it says for the mouth is a controlling that is fire, like for the genitals controlling that is Prajapatis. So we say all these demigods for Adidavik. But here for Adidavik he says a living entity is Adidavik.
Well, the demigods are also living entities.
But here exactly what is the difference between Adidavik? Here we say the living entity is Adidavik, and whereas the person undergoing the function is Adhyatmik. What is the difference between a living entity here and a person undergoing the function, Maharaj?
The person undergoing the function, that is the soul. That is the internal nature of the person. We're talking about the internal nature. When we speak about the Adhyatmik, that is the person who contemplates himself within, contemplating himself in the spiritual, as a spiritual soul within.
But then what is the living entity, Maharaj? Is it the gross body then?
Sorry?
Then what is the living entity which is Adidavik here?
Well, there are three conceptions of the person, right? Three conceptions, and they're all there. They all have to be there. They're all interdependent. There's the Adibhautik, the Adhyatmik, and the Adidavik. Right? So the Adhyatmik is the internal conception of the self, and the Adibhautik is the externally. And the Adidavik are the subtle senses. That there's two kinds of senses. We have the gross senses, but we have also these subtle senses. You got some construction going on there in your house, I think.
Not my place, Maharaj, somewhere else.
Somewhere else, okay.
Someone else is unmuted.
Yes. So the Adidavik, this is the subtle senses. These subtle senses which are actually they're under the direction of these demigods, which direct us to do different things. You see, it's not our gross senses which actually do it, it's these subtle senses, it's Adidavik. And the power comes from the demigods, which acts on these subtle senses and allows them to act and perceive different sense objects.
Sorry, Maharaj. So then if it is in that case, when we're talking about text 9, where we say the sunlight and the eyes, there's a comparison for sunlight and eyes. Does they say that the sunlight, one second, Maharaj. Sorry, I'm just taking a verse.
It's text 9 only, Mother.
Yes, text 9. Yeah, without our having eyes, the sunlight is useless.
Yes, so here the sunlight we can say is as Adidavik, Maharaj, or what? How can we decide?
Well, no. But we're talking about these personalities, you see. So the Adidavik, these are the demigods who are they're controlling these different senses. So they have that ability to influence the different senses of the individual. You see, their personalities. We have that consciousness. You know that somebody is very conscious of the senses and how the demigods are directing him. They're very sensually active. Somebody else is more restrained and contemplating within, and somebody else is just contemplating the external feature, the body, seen by the eyes. So 3 different conceptions of the self, of the person. And they're all present, but to different degrees. One will become more prominent than others. So Adidavik is talking about these subtle senses which influence the living entity.
Maharaj, these 3 are present in us also.
Huh?
These three, like Adhyatmik, Adi Bhautik, Adi Devik, are present in us also, in Jivas.
I'm sorry, it's not clear what you said.
These three conceptions are in a person, so they are in Jivas also, present in Jivas also.
Yes. Yes. They're in Jivas, right.
And in Supreme Lord, they are in full manifestation, and in us, there is degrees.
They're mentioned in the Virata Roop, they're there.
Okay.
In the Virata Roop, they're there.
So Maharaj, just to clarify my understanding, so what my understanding is that for any, all these sensory organs, whether it's genitals, eyes, ears, nose, whatever, the tongue, so all these sensory organs are that we can say are the Bhautik, and the subtle senses are Adhyatmic, subtle senses are Adidhavik, and soul is Adhyatmic. Is that clear? Is that correct, Maharaj?
Yes, I think that's right. Yeah.
Okay, Maharaj. Thank you so much. I have one more question from text 13, Maharaj. In the translation, it says, "The Lord, while lying on his bed of mystic slumber, generated the seminal seminal symbol, golden in hue." So I didn't understand what is this seminal symbol, Maharaj. In text 13.
Yes, well, it's describing about the creation, the external energy, right? Through external energy, out of his desire to manifest varieties of living entities from himself alone. So from this seminal symbol, this is like, it's like the glance of Vishnu or something. The seminal symbol, the creation is being described. How the living entities come out. Because remember, at the time of the annihilation, everything enters into Vishnu. Karanadakashayi Vishnu. So then, when the creation begins again, they're all going to come out from the body of Mahavishnu. Right? So this is the seminal symbol. He generated the seminal symbol. This is the living entities. They're coming out from him to begin again the recreation.
So the seminal symbol means living entities.
The mass of the total, multi-total energy, we could call it, right? Everything, all the different living entities coming out. You can see in the purport Prabhupada quoting from the Bhagavad Gita about the creation. At the end of the millennium, the forms enter into, and then when the recreation takes, then they all come out again. They manifest everything. So material nature is working under the control of the Lord. So it's described like this. Prabhupada, well, in the translation, Prabhupada's explained it like that. Let's see. Samstuti, the Viryam, the semen, Haranmayam, golden hue. Samutiya, this generated the semen, which is golden hue. So the creation, the seminal symbol, not feminine as we think of it in our sense, in the human form, but on the transcendental level, that he generated the living entity. So it's described like that, as being a seminal symbol.
So that's the creative energy of the Lord here. Thank you, Maharaj. Just one more last question.
Yes.
So what is the difference exactly between the Chatusloki of Bhagavad Gita and Chatusloki of Srimad Bhagavatam?
Well, Bhagavad Gita is explaining it in a very simple way, right? Bhagavad Gita is like the ABC.
Yeah.
The Srimad Bhagavatam is the original verses of the Lord. They're both describing Sambandha, but Sambandha can be described in so many different ways, right? They begin with Sambandha, and we had 2 slokas of Sambandha here in Chaturshloki, and then we had Prema Bhakti. It's also, Prema Bhakti is not really there in the Bhagavad Gita, but certainly Abhidaya, they're talking about Abhidaya. The Abhidaya is still love of God. So, okay, somewhat the same, but Bhagavad Gita, everything presented in a very simple manner, very basic. Srimad Bhagavatam, much deeper, much more profound.
Yes, Madam. Yeah.
And the Mayavadi, the impersonalists, the Vedantists, the Ramakrishna people and all these Vedanta society gang, they all will go to this Chaturshloki in the Bhagavatam. They don't accept Bhagavad Gita. You see, they only accept the Vedas. But still they take the Chaturshloki, although Srimad Bhagavatam is also Smriti, they take this Chaturshloki and they start analyzing it. It's very open to the Mayavadi philosophy, and so it attracts them. But basically it's the same points, Sambandha, Abhidaya, Prayojana, but just different levels of explaining Sambandha. The Bhagavad Gita is keeping it in a more basic way. But Bhagavatam is much deeper, more profound.
Yes, Maharaj. Thank you so much, Maharaj.
Okay. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Lalita? Yes? Lalita, you have a question?
Maharaj, like in Bhagavad Gita 8.4, it mentions the universal form, the Lord includes all the demigods and is called Adidev. And here in 2. In the purport of 10th text 10th mentioned the gigantic universal form of Lord Mahavishnu. Then the universal form is Mahavishnu. So can we understand that Mahavishnu is universal form Adidev? And also in Bhagavad Gita there is written super soul is called Adhiyagya. Then can we understand that Shirodaksai is Adhiyagya?
Well, we don't hear it quite like that. Who is Adidaiva, Adiyagya? Lord Krishna has described Adidaiva, Adiyagya. Lord Krishna himself is that.
Okay, not in terms of, we can't understand in terms of 3 Vishnus.
Well, Vishnu and Krishna are the same. You may, we don't really make a distinction between Vishnu and Krishna. Vishnu is also Adidaiva, Adiyagya. But Lord Krishna also, both. You can't say, oh, this is Vishnu and this is not Krishna. When you speak about Adidaiva, Adiyagya, you cannot say it's not Krishna, it's only Vishnu. Both, applies to both.
I see. And similarly, universal form applies to both Mahavishnu and Garbhodakshai Vishnu. Because at places it's mentioned like this, it's like Garbhodakshai Vishnu.
Yeah. Mahavishnu, let's see, what does it say here? The different universe is a gigantic universal form of the Lord, Mahavishnu, which came out of the causal ocean. Well, that's a special universal form, coming out of the causal ocean, right? It's Mahavishnu's own universal. There are different universal forms, like the Lord showed the universal form on Kurukshetra. That was Kalarup as well as Viratarup. So here's a special form which is coming out from the causal ocean. At different times the Lord will show different forms, but the idea is everything material. Everything material is there. The form of the Lord, and it's all material, temporary. So it's not really Mahavishnu, but it's coming from Mahavishnu.
Maharaj, thank you, Maharaj. Maharaj, in the 8th chapter, it is mentioned the snake was also twice born. The snake which had come, which was going to kill Maharaj Parikshit. How snake can also be a twice born?
Oh, I'm sorry, you have to repeat.
In text 26 of chapter 8,
Bhagavad Gita.
Bhagavatam, in text in chapter 18 of Bhagavatam, chapter 8, text 26, is mentioned that the snake is also twice born. And the snake which was going to kill Maharaj Parikshit, so the snake can also be twice born. How can a snake can be a twice born? I can't understand.
Well, twice born, not in the sense that he's being elevated, right? But it could be that he's taking birth. Let me see, where is it? Let me see, now text 26.
Of chapter 8.
Yeah.
Last paragraph.
Last paragraph. Yeah. Maharaj Parikshit was set afraid of death, for he was fully. The king might be overwhelmed by the thought of this imminent death. Where is it? Oh, the snake. The snake is also twice born, and its anger is compared to the cursing Brahmana boy who was without good intelligence. The snake is also twice born. How to explain that? I don't know. I have to ask about it. It's interesting. I didn't notice this before. Yeah, snake is also twice born, but it's not a spiritual elevation. The second birth, we think of the second birth as being elevation, but it's still a snake, right? So, twice born. It may have been that it disappeared and then appeared again for the purpose of killing Maharaj Parikshit. We don't know. I shouldn't speculate. I don't know. I'll try to find out.